Imagine, like, the most rule-abiding, strictly religious person in history. Just picture that.
Right, someone who follows every single detail.
Exactly. And then imagine them just casually shattering the fundamental laws of time, space, and biology without even blinking an eye.
It sounds completely contradictory.
It really does. But that's the paradox we're looking at today. Welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one.
So our mission today is to unpack this really intriguing article by Rabbi Shlomo Ezagui, and it bridges two worlds that you rarely see in the same room.
Oh, definitely. You've got ancient Chassidic wisdom on one side, and then modern quantum physics on the other.
Right. And just to set the parameters for you listening before we jump in, the source material relies pretty heavily on religious concepts and, historical accounts of Tzaddikim.
Which are godly, holy people in the Jewish tradition, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But our goal here isn't to, endorse a specific theology or validate any religious worldview. We're taking a strictly impartial, intellectual approach.
We just want to see how these ancient spiritual paradigms surprisingly mirror some of the most cutting-edge scientific theories of our time.
Exactly. It's this fascinating look at how deeply in sync this traditional wisdom might actually be with the fundamental nature of the physical universe. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. Where do we start?
I think we have to start with the core mystery the author presents. He sets up this paradox using two specific historical anecdotes that, well, on the surface, they just defy all logic.
They really do. The behavior just seems so out of character for who these people were.
Yeah, so the first story involves the Semak Tzedek, who was this very prominent Chassidic master from the 1800s, and the setting is a night called Nittel.
Right, and for those who don't know, in this community, Nittel is a night with a very strict established custom to specifically not study Torah.
Which is wild because usually they're studying constantly. But this is a deliberate, calculated pause in their, normally rigorous schedule.
Yeah, it's a pause rooted in very specific historical and spiritual reasoning for that time of year. It's not just a casual suggestion.
It's a rule. But on this specific night, another rabbi walks into the room and finds that some Tzedek just deeply immersed in study.
Like completely engrossed.
Completely. And the rabbi is, he's shocked. He blurts out, "Rebbe, tonight is Nittel."
Which is a pretty bold thing to yell at a master.
Right. And that Tzemach Tzedek snaps back at him very sharply, "Who asked you to inform me?"
Wow.
But then, and this is the part that really trips me up, immediately after snapping at the guy, he just closes his book and stops studying.
It's a massive behavioral contradiction.
It is. It's like, I was thinking about this. It's like watching a master chef suddenly decide to eat soup with a fork. It just doesn't make sense.
That's a great way to put it.
If the rules of his tradition are absolute, why is he breaking them in the first place?
Right.
And if someone of his spiritual stature, isn't bound by those rules, why bother closing the book the second he's reminded?
Right. Why comply if you're above it?
Exactly. And the second story the author brings up makes this even more confusing. This one is about the Middler Rebbe, who was actually the predecessor to the Tzemach Tzedek.
Oh, yeah, the church story. This one takes place late at night in the pouring rain.
Yeah. So a group of his followers, his Chassidim, are walking home after this profoundly uplifting spiritual gathering with the Rebbe.
And they're just trying to escape the weather. So they take shelter under this overhang.
But it's dark, right? So they don't realize the building they're leaning against is a church.
Which, in their highly structured religious framework, is a massive deal.
Huge. A church represents an entirely different, contradictory spiritual energy that they view as impure or negative.
So when they finally realize where they're standing, they are just devastated.
They feel completely spiritually contaminated. So they run straight back to the Mittler Rebbe and beg him for a tikkun, like a spiritual fix or a cleansing for this accidental exposure.
And you'd anticipate the leader of such a boundary-focused community to treat a breach of those boundaries with immense gravity, right?
You would think. But instead, he just smiles. He completely dismisses their concerns, basically waving the whole thing off as if it never happened.
It's baffling.
I mean, I'm struggling to see how this isn't just arbitrary behavior. We have the ultimate guardians of the rules just casually brushing them aside. How does the author reconcile this without just saying, they're holy, so they do what they want?
Well, he reconciles it by taking a really hard pivot away from theology. He dives straight into modern physics.
Okay, now we're talking.
Specifically, the shift from classical physics to quantum mechanics. Because classical physics, like the Newtonian science we all learned in middle school, tells us the universe is a collection of separate, independent parts.
Right. A chair is a discrete object.
Mhm.
An atom is a discrete object.
Exactly. They bounce off each other, but they're fundamentally separate entities.
So it's a universe made of distinct building blocks.
Yes. But in the 20th century, physicists like David Bohm recognized that this classical model just falls apart at the subatomic level. Well, Bohm proposed that reality isn't made of separate parts at all. He introduced this concept called the implicate order.
The implicate order, okay.
Yeah. His theory posits that the universe is actually an undivided, seamless whole. All the discrete objects we interact with are really just temporary surface-level manifestations emerging from that hidden, unified depth.
So wait, is Bohm an outlier here, or does mainstream physics actually support this kind of seamless unity?
No. Mainstream quantum field theory heavily supports the underlying premise.
Really?
Yeah. In quantum field theory, the universe isn't filled with tiny, isolated particle spheres. It's filled with continuous, invisible fields that stretch across all of space and time.
Okay, my brain is stretching a bit.
That's a lot, I know. But basically what we perceive as a distinct particle, like, say, an electron, is really just a localized vibration. It's a spike in energy within the underlying electron field.
So the separation is kind of an illusion created by our limited perception. Okay, but if everything is just one unified field, why do I stub my toe when I walk into a coffee table? I mean, the table feels pretty separate from my foot when that happens. I'm having a hard time bridging the high-level physics with my everyday reality.
That's the perfect question. And the author uses a fantastic analogy from Bohm to explain that exact disconnect.
Let's hear it.
Imagine a fast-moving river. When you look at the surface, you see waves, ripples, and little whirlpools.
Right. Here.
From your vantage point on the bank, each wave looks like its own distinct entity. Wave A is moving fast. Wave B is crashing. You could point to them and measure them independently.
Right, so that's my toe hitting the coffee table.
Exactly. That's the explicate order, the surface reality.
And underneath, there's no wave A or wave B.
Precisely. Beneath the surface, it's all just the exact same continuous body of water. The separateness is entirely real and functional on the surface plane, but at the level of essence, the depth of the river, there's no separation at all.
That actually makes a ton of sense. And the author also uses a cognitive analogy that I found really helpful for understanding the mechanism of this.
Close the thought analogy.
Yeah. Think about how a thought forms in your mind. Like a raw insight, a flash of understanding. It's abstract and unified.
It's all one thing.
Right. But the moment you want to communicate that insight to me, what do you have to do? You have to fracture it. You have to break that unified feeling down into letters, syntax, and spoken words.
And those spoken words have very strict boundaries.
Yeah.
A noun is not a verb. A sentence has a beginning and an end.
Exactly. But those boundaries only exist to facilitate communication. They are just fragments of the original undivided thought.
What's fascinating here is how the author argues that the physical reality we experience, like the laws of nature, the distances between objects, the ticking of a clock, are simply the letters of a much deeper, unified, divine thought.
Wow. So multiplicity, the fact that I am sitting here and you're sitting there and you listening or wherever you are, is basically a necessary contraction.
A contraction, exactly.
Because if we lived constantly in the pure, unified thought, we couldn't function as individuals. We need the fragmented letters to have a human experience.
We absolutely rely on that contraction. But according to Chassidic philosophy, a tzaddik, a spiritual master like the ones in our stories, is someone who has trained their consciousness.
Trained it how?
To perceive and operate from that underlying unity, the implicate order, even while existing in a physical body.
Oh, man. This totally changes how we read those two opening stories. Let's look at the Chassidic again through this physics lens.
Yeah, let's do it.
The source code versus user interface analogy came to mind here. Like, the rest of us are stuck using the universe's user interface. We drag a file, it moves, we follow the rules of time and space.
Right, we're on the surface level.
But these masters occasionally drop down and access the universe's source code.
That analogy fits perfectly. Think about it. When the Chassidic was deep in study on Niddle, his consciousness wasn't operating in the user interface.
He wasn't in the letters.
Right. He was fully immersed in the underlying unity, the implicate order. And at that essential depth, the fragmented boundaries of time, like the fact that it happens to be a specific Tuesday night called Niddle, simply don't exist.
Because time is a surface wave.
Exactly. He was in the deep water.
But then the other rabbi walks in, panics, and shouts, "Tonight is Nittel."
And what does that do?
He forcefully drags the Tzemach awareness back up to the surface. He forces him to look at the letters instead of the unified thought.
Which perfectly explains the Rebbe's frustration. When he says, "Who asked you to inform me?" it translates to, "Why did you pull me out of the deep water?"
That is wild.
But the crucial part is what happens next. Once his awareness was brought back to the surface, back to the user interface, he immediately closed his book.
Because he's not an anarchist.
Far from it.
Yeah.
He recognizes that both realities are true simultaneously. The revealed order, the user interface with its strict rules and customs, is completely valid and necessary for human existence.
But the underlying unity is the ultimate truth.
Right. So when he was pulled back into normative reality, he instantly aligned with its normative framework.
Okay, that makes the second story with the Mitler in the church makes so much more sense now.
It really does.
Because the followers were entirely operating in the user interface. In their structured, surface-level world, the distinction between a holy place and an impure place is very real.
And the author notes that their reaction of feeling contaminated was completely appropriate for the level of reality they were inhabiting.
But the Mitler was operating from the source code.
Exactly. At the absolute root level of reality, no physical space is inherently separate from the divine unity.
So the impurity of the church only existed in the fragmented, explicate order.
Yes. And because the followers had just come from an intensely elevated spiritual gathering, the Rebbe perceived that their core essence was already connected to the underlying unity.
So the surface-level negative energy just couldn't stick to them. He didn't dismiss their concerns because he thought their rules were silly.
Not at all.
He dismissed them because, from the vantage point of the unified field, the problem literally did not exist.
It's a stunning example of how ancient Chassidic wisdom intuitively grasped the exact models of reality that quantum physicists are mapping out today.
It really is, and the author takes this even further. Because if these masters can shift their consciousness to bypass behavioral rules, what happens when they encounter the hard laws of biology, time, and physical space?
Oh, this is where it gets really good.
Yeah, this is where the article really blew my mind. Let's dig into the biology aspect, because the author highlights a wild debate in the Talmud regarding a developing fetus.
Right, it's a contrast between the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud.
Which are two massive foundational texts.
Exactly. The Babylonian Talmud states that 40 days after conception, the biological gender of a fetus is set. Therefore, praying for the gender to change after that 40-day mark is considered a prayer in vain.
Which makes sense.
Right. You're essentially asking for a retrospective miracle, and the halakhic rule is that you don't rely on miracles. You must operate within the established laws of nature.
Which is the ultimate user interface ruling. Biology is biology. The wave is moving. You can't just wish it into a different wave.
But the Jerusalem Talmud takes an entirely different stance.
Which is what?
The Jerusalem Talmud argues that you can actually pray for a specific outcome right up to the moment of birth, provided the gender hasn't been definitively observed yet.
Wait, how does the Jerusalem Talmud justify ignoring basic biology? If the genetics are set, what's physically happening in the womb, according to this perspective?
Okay, to understand it, we have to look at one of the most famous concepts in quantum mechanics. Schrodinger's cat.
Oh, the cat in the box.
Yes. In that thought experiment, a cat is placed in a sealed box with a mechanism that has a 50-50 chance of releasing a localized toxin.
Right, I heard of this.
Quantum mechanics states that until you open the box and observe the system, the cat isn't definitively alive or dead. It exists in a state of superposition.
Meaning both states exist at once.
Exactly. All possibilities exist simultaneously as a wave of probability. It's only the act of observation that causes the wave function to collapse into one definite reality.
So wait, the Jerusalem Talmud is treating the womb like Schrodinger's box.
In a sense, yeah. The Babylonian Talmud speaks from the perspective of the explicate order, where biological rules are fixed. But the Jerusalem Talmud is described as speaking from the implicate order, the source code.
Oh, wow.
From the perspective of the underlying unity, the physical mechanics haven't definitively collapsed yet. Until the absolute final moment of manifestation, all possibilities remain open in the unified field.
Because the source itself isn't bound by the biological structures it generates.
Exactly.
That is incredible. They were basically debating quantum superposition thousands of years before the terminology even existed.
It's pretty amazing.
And if biology is fluid at that level, then the ticking clock has to be fluid too. The source brings up a much more recent example involving the Lubavitcher Rebbe.
Yes, so there are accounts of the Lubavitcher Rebbe praying the afternoon service Mincha long, past the strict, non-negotiable deadline set by religious law.
Why was he late?
He was returning late from visiting his father-in-law's resting place.
Which, again, normally would be a massive violation. I mean, if you miss the sunset deadline, you miss the prayer. How does someone of his rigid adherence just ignore the rotation of the Earth?
Because time itself is a surface wave.
Right, right.
From the vantage point of our daily lives, time is a strict progression of past, present, and future. But if you drop down into the undivided whole, time loses its absolute authority.
It's just more letters.
Exactly. To a Tzaddik deeply connected to that dimension, the ticking of the clock doesn't dictate reality. It's just another boundary created by the user interface.
So praying late in the surface world still connects perfectly in the unified world where past and present are merged.
You got it.
Okay, so if biology is a surface wave and time is a surface wave, then physical geography has to be one too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
This brings us to the Ariel Sharon story, which I think really illustrates the how of all this.
Yeah, this is a great example. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's fascinating. So Ariel Sharon, the famed Israeli military commander and future prime minister, had a private audience with the Lubavitcher Rebbe.
And where did this take place?
The Rebbe was seated in his office in Brooklyn, New York.
Thousands of miles away from the Middle East.
Exactly. And after their meeting, Sharon reportedly noted that the Rebbe possessed a clearer, more tactically accurate understanding of Israel's physical geography and the granular military situation on the ground than the actual commanders who were standing in the valleys of Israel.
I mean, from a purely physical standpoint, that's impossible. Unless he had, like, a secret satellite feed. Your knowledge is constrained by your physical location.
It's constrained if you believe the letters are the only reality. If you want to know what's happening in a valley in Israel, you have to be standing there or receive a signal from someone who is. But remember Bohm's physics.
The unbroken whole.
Right. If the universe is fundamentally unified, then physical distance is an illusion. Brooklyn and Israel are not two separate disconnected places at the root level. They're just different expressions of the exact same continuous field.
So he isn't sending his mind across the ocean to gather data. He's dropping his consciousness down into the unified thought, where Brooklyn and Israel are the exact same point, and pulling that awareness back up.
Precisely. Accessing that information doesn't require a miracle or clairvoyance in the traditional sense. It requires a profound shift in perspective.
He was just reading the source code.
Yeah, the source code where the distance between point A and point B just doesn't exist.
It's so striking how this portrays the wisdom of these Torah and Chassidic masters, not as, mystical rule-breaking, but as an existence completely in sync with the deepest natural laws of the universe.
In sync with nature and modern-day science, yeah.
But this begs a massive question for you listening, because, you're listening to this and you're not a quantum physicist, and you're probably not a Chassidic master.
Probably not.
You live in the user interface, you have a physical body, you sit in traffic, you face closed doors. What does this mean for you?
Well, the author is very careful to emphasize that you shouldn't ignore the user interface. The practical conclusion is not to pretend the physical world doesn't matter.
Right.
The structures of time, space, and cause and effect are real and necessary. You can't, step off a roof and assume gravity is an illusion. We have to act responsibly within the natural order.
Right, like how the Samak Tzedek still closed the book. You respect the surface rules.
Exactly. But the key takeaway is that you shouldn't let those rules completely define your sense of what is possible.
Okay, I love that.
Which completely reframes concepts like faith, trust, and prayer. In this paradigm, they aren't just emotional coping mechanisms for when life gets hard.
They're practical.
Highly practical tools. They are the actual mechanisms by which a person shifts their consciousness.
They're the login credentials for the source code.
Yes. When you exhibit deep, unwavering trust in a positive outcome despite the physical evidence, you are actively refusing to accept the surface-level letters as the final truth.
You're bypassing the wave.
You are reaching past the fragmented waves and aligning your mind with the infinite depth beneath where those boundaries begin to dissolve.
To live with this awareness is to navigate the surface while staying plugged into the depth, which, honestly, leaves us with a really concrete way to apply this.
How so?
Well, if the boundaries of our physical reality, the ticking clock, the distance to a goal, a seemingly impossible hurdle, are just the spoken words of a deeper, unified thought, we don't have to panic when we hit a wall.
You realize the wall isn't absolute.
Exactly. What happens when you face a rigid limitation in your life, a deadline, a lack of resources, and instead of treating it as an unbreakable concrete wall, you recognize it as just a surface condition?
It changes everything.
You can actually use trust and focus to find the hidden variable or the opportunity underneath. You start treating your limitations as a language you can converse with rather than a cage that traps you.
I love that perspective.
It's something for you to test out the next time you feel stuck in the user interface. Think about the underlying unity. Until next time.